tornado safety, you want to be either below ground or in a certified storm shelter. That is
What are you doing?
We are off to see the wizard. You know, I'm the Tin Man. I'm so excited about this. There is so much science and so much that flies in the Wizard of Oz.
There are a lot of things that fly, including monkeys, brooms, hot air balloons, and even cows.
Not to mention the science behind rainbows, the conservation of the ruby slippers, and even the simple machines used on Broadway.
You know, I knew you were going to do something like this. Here is a much more appropriate costume. This is STEM in 30.
Hi, I'm Marty.
And I'm Beth. Today we are off to see the Wizard of Oz, that is.
If you are under 83 years old, you have literally had your entire life to watch the movie. But just in case there's some spoilers coming up, pause this show, go watch The Wizard of Oz, and come back.
The beloved movie that you've probably seen was made in 1939, and the special effects they used back then were without the use of CGI, but they still hold up today.
But the story of The Wizard of Oz is actually much older.
The novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L.Frank Baum, was first published in the United States in 1900, and like the movie, features a Kansas farm girl named Dorothy and her dog Toto, who are swept away by a tornado to the land of Oz, where she meets the Wicked Witch, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, as well as the Munchkins and the Winged Monkeys.
After writing The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, L.Frank Baum wasn't going to write a sequel. But after thousands of kids wrote him letters asking for another Oz story, he wrote the first sequel, The Marvelous Land of Oz, which was followed by 13 additional books and 6 Oz short stories.
The movie came out in 1939 and featured Judy Garland, Ray Bolger, Jack Haley, and Burt Lahr. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Visual Effects.
Since then, it has inspired numerous spin-offs, including books, cartoons, and 2 Tony Award-winning musicals, Wicked and The Wiz, which was later adapted into a movie featuring Michael Jackson.
Throughout the world of Oz, there is a lot of science.
The movie starts in black and white with Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. And while Dorothy was in black and white while singing about rainbows,
rainbows are all about color.
Scientists have even been able to weigh a rainbow.
Really?
Turns out they're pretty light.
Here's something you can try at home to learn more about rainbows.
Hi, I'm Trey. Rainbows are an amazing natural phenomenon. They're caused by sunlight and the correct atmospheric conditions. Light enters a water droplet and then travels at different speeds. The light slows down and bends as it goes from air to the denser water. The different wavelengths of light travel at different speeds inside the water droplet and bend slightly different amounts. The light reflects off the inside of the droplet and spreads out so you can see all the different wavelengths of visual light. When the light exits the droplet, it makes a rainbow. An easy way to remember the colors of the rainbow are Roy G. Biv: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. A full rainbow is actually a complete circle, but from the ground we can only see one arching part of it. From an airplane, in the right conditions, you can actually see an entire circular rainbow. There are lots of ways to bend light to make a rainbow. You can use a prism to create a rainbow at home if you have one. You can also use something called diffraction film, which is used in rainbow or fireworks classes. You can even hang crystals from old chandeliers in your window to see rainbows, but there are some other easier ways to bend light into a rainbow. One simple way is to take a CD and either turn the shiny side in direct sunlight so it reflects on a wall, or shine a flashlight on the back of the CD. Play with different angles to see what it does to the rainbows it produced. Like water drops that create a rainbow outside, the CD separates white light into all of the colors that make it up. But don't forget water. When it's warm and sunny, take a spray bottle, fill it with water, find a sunny spot, and spray some water. You can also use a garden hose with a mister or a sprinkler on a sunny day to get the same effect. Look at the mist in the sunlight to see the colors. Of course, the most fun way is watching mud form when the right combination of sun and rain collide. Where else can you find rainbow forming at your house? How about outside? Anytime the conditions are right to separate light, you have that chance of seeing a rainbow.
That's your best costume so far.
Monkeys, hot air balloons, and brooms.
There are a surprising amount of things that fly in The Wizard of Oz.
Including houses, cows, and even someone on a bike.
And those are just in the first scene when Dorothy gets swept away to Oz by a tornado. We are excited to be joined by meteorologist and storm chaser Emily Sutton, who's going to take a look at that famous scene and tell us what is fact and what is fantasy.
Hey everybody, I'm meteorologist Emily Sutton at KFOR TV, the NBC affiliate in Oklahoma City. We have everything here in Oklahoma, but we're mainly known for tracking tornadoes. Now, the only thing the movie has in common with real life tornadoes probably has to do with wind and dirt. That's real. In real life, here in Tornado Alley especially, the way it forms is with all these air masses colliding. So you have warm, moist air moving in south from the Gulf of Mexico. You have dry desert air moving in from the west. You have cool Canadian air moving in from the northwest. And when something called an updraft, which is a warm, moist air that feeds into the storm, I call it the tornado's fuel. It's the storm fuel, okay? It eats this warm, moist air. And the final step is something called a rear flank downdraft. So it's this wind that wraps around near the surface, but that's what brings the funnel high up down to the surface and creates a tornado.
What is one of the most terrifying things that flies in The Wizard of Oz? The monkeys.
At the National Air and Space Museum, we have some amazing curators who help us out by lending us their knowledge on a huge array of topics.
So we went to one of them, Dr. Bob Vanderlinden, curator in the aeronautics department, to get his take on if monkeys could fly.
You can make anything fly if you give it enough power. Put enough big enough engine on it, with enough fuel, light it, it'll get off the ground.
That wasn't exactly what we were expecting.
We asked Dr. Michael Neufeld, senior curator in the Space History Department, about flying monkeys. And it turns out they have flown in space.
Very little was known about the effects of spaceflight on living beings back in the early days of space exploration. So researchers sent animals into space to study those effects.
After several early failed attempts to launch and recover a primate safely, the United States military in May 1959 sent a rhesus monkey named Abel and a squirrel monkey named Baker to an altitude of 300 miles aboard a Jupiter rocket. Both primates were retrieved unharmed.
After her death, Abel, along with her rocket couch, became part of the collection of the National Air and Space Museum. Baker lived until 1984 at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and is buried there where some people still leave bananas on her grave marker as tribute.
After Abel and Baker, a chimp named Ham was launched on a suborbital spaceflight. Ham reached an altitude of 157 miles during a 16-and-a-half-minute trip and was recovered unharmed.
This successful flight led the way to Alan Shepard's flight to become the first American in space. Primates have also flown more recently, including 2 squirrel monkeys that flew on the space shuttle in 1985.
Those monkeys did fly, but with the help of rather large engines.
We decided to take a different approach and talk with someone who knows a bit more.
Hi everyone, my name is Becky Malinsky and I am the curator of primates at the Smithsonian's National Zoo. As the curator of primates, I am responsible not only for the animals in my care, but also the staff that take care of them. Ever since I can remember, when I was a little girl, I was passionate about primates. I cannot explain why, but it was a very strong drive. I knew that I wanted to work with them in some capacity. So just like many of us, I watched The Wizard of Oz several times as a child, and I loved the entire film, but given my passion for primates, I was especially focused on these strange flying monkeys that appear. Thinking back on how I reacted to watching the film the first time, I remember having sort of a sense of empathy or feeling sorry for the monkeys because I felt the Wicked Witch had control over them and they were only, doing her bidding and going after Dorothy and Toto because that's what the witch made them do. I sort of felt sympathy for them, but also a little bit of fear and fascination because they were these strange magical creatures that were monkeys, but not any species of monkey that actually exists in real life. There are some animals that are often called flying lemurs. Lemurs are a type of prosimian, so a type of primate, but these animals that are often called flying lemurs are really not primates. They're really not lemurs at all. They are animals that kind of glide. They don't have wings. They can't flap wings to make them fly, but they will jump, and they have sort of these flaps of skin on the sides of their bodies that allow them to glide from tree branch to tree branch. There are primates that are fantastic leapers and swingers that it almost looks like they're flying when you watch them maneuver around. Gibbons are one of those animals that come to mind. Gibbons are found in Southeast Asia. They're a small ape species, and they have these really long arms that they use to swing from branch to branch, and they can build up such great speed as they're swinging from tree to tree and branch to branch that it looks like they're flying, but they're not. They don't have the capability to fly, but they have such upper body strength that they can throw their bodies from branch to branch, so it appears as though they're flying. So even though real monkeys can't fly like the flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz, they are just as cool.
One of the most important scenes in the movie is when Dorothy throws water on the witch, and the witch melts.
Here's something cool that you can do to amaze your friends. This is just regular old cotton candy, very thin strands of sugar.
But look what happens when you put it in water. I'm melting!
That's a pretty cool party trick, but it leads to an interesting question. How did the Wicked Witch take a bath?
What do you do if you don't have access to a bathtub or a shower?
Astronauts in space have that exact situation, a very limited amount of water. So how do they stay clean?
So the first thing that I do is I like to get my hair wet first. The shampoo that we use is called a no-rinse shampoo, but it definitely helps to use a little bit of water when you're using it. I also get my towel ready because I don't want the water to go everywhere. Even though we have these nice curtains to protect the equipment back there, I want to go ahead and do my best to keep the water from going all over the place. And then the water is actually trapped underneath this towel, and I can just use the towel to rub it around and make sure that all of my hair gets just a little bit damp for starters. And you can see I still lose a few drops of water even when I use the towel and keep it close to hand. So it's one of the fun parts of trying to get your hair clean in microgravity. Then I take the comb and I comb the water through my hair, trying to be real careful not to get water everywhere. So now that my hair is a little bit wet, I'm gonna go ahead and put some of this no-rinse shampoo, and then I go ahead and I rub it in a little bit, just like you would on Earth. Rub that in. And then I like to take my comb and comb it out through to the ends. Okay, then it's back to the water and the towel. So now the idea is, of course, to try to rinse that soap out of my hair. And then I use the towel to rub it in. Then find a dry part of your towel and try to get as much of that extra water out of your hair as you can. The air conditioning system will pick up the condensate both from the towel and from my hair and put that back into the water reclamation system, turn it back into drinking water. So we are able to reclaim over 70% of our water, and folks on the ground are working with technology demonstrators right now to get that number up above 95%. So it'd be pretty great to have that amount of water reclaimed in our system, especially from when we go on to places like the moon and Mars. We're going to need to keep as much of that water usable as we can. So there you have it. That's how you can wash your hair in space. And then the fun part, how you can style your hair in space. You can put it pretty much in any direction you want it to go. Straight up is always fun. Maybe this will be a good look for today. What do you think?
Earlier, we mentioned that there have been a lot of adaptations and spin-offs of The Wizard of Oz.
Everything from books to movies to cartoons and even a successful Broadway musical, Wicked.
Ali Mawzy played Glinda on Broadway and got to fly in a bubble.
Everyone deserves a chance to fly.
Wicked the musical is basically the untold true story of the Witches of Oz, which is Glinda the Good and Elphaba. I played Glinda when I did Wicked on Broadway, which is sometimes hard for people to see because I am brunette in real life. What I loved about Glinda was her arc. When she comes in, you see her on a very maybe superficial level. By the end of the show, there's a lot of conflict between her and Elphaba, and she grows a lot, and she has more depth. She's not just all about being popular by the end of the show. So Glinda's preferred method of travel is by bubble. And I indeed got to ride in that bubble on Broadway 8 times a week. The best entrance to have on a Broadway stage is to come from the sky, with bubbles being in a bubble. There are definitely simple machines that make theater happen. I definitely think it is safe to say that without simple machinery, a lot of shows wouldn't exist. As a Broadway actress, I've been a part of so many shows where I am so in awe of all the machinery that makes the magic happen. There are tracks on the stage and a lot of set pieces create this whole world where all the sets and everything comes together and it's in line with the storytelling. A designer who designs something like the bubble and they have in their perfect world, this is what I want it to look like. And then you have to talk to somebody who can build that, and they have to figure out how they can marry the two. And the designer might have to rethink something to make the logistics of it work. There's a whole level of creativity on the technical side of it. We're like, how are we going to make this designer's basically designer dreams come true? And simple machines make it happen. And in a show like Wicked, it does, as an audience member, it does feel magical. Just think like if Glinda didn't come down in a bubble or didn't ride on her bed, or at the top you have that dragon at the top of the stage, you would still have the music, you would still have the actors, but the show is only enhanced and lifted up and made better because of all the machinery that goes on backstage.
One of the most amazing parts of The Wizard of Oz are the practical effects, or the ways that they trick the viewers.
Back when The Wizard of Oz was produced in 1939, there weren't any computer-generated special effects. All the effects had to be done in a way that looked on camera like they were actually happening.
Something like this. Kazam!
When the Wicked Witch disappears behind a plume of smoke, she actually took an elevator built into the stage down so it appeared as if she disappeared. No computer effects.
There are even a few practical effects or optical illusions you can try at home.
Optical illusions can be a lot of fun. But what exactly is an optical illusion? Optical illusions can use color, light, patterns, and even movement to create images that can be deceptive or misleading to our brains. They can simply trick our brains to seeing things that aren't really real. For instance, do you see a duck or a bunny? Or is this a frog or a horse? Typically, optical illusions are more images or pictures that we perceive differently than what they really are. But they can also be more complex. Before we had computer special effects that allow people to see movies on flying broomsticks, optical illusions were important in creating the fantasy worlds. Here are some illusions that you can try at home. Want to fly in a broom like a wicked witch or maybe a young wizard? You will need a few special materials: a broom, a large towel or blanket, and something sturdy to stand on, like a box. Start by putting the blanket or towel over the broom. You will want to hang all the way down from the broom to the floor. Next, stand on the box and put the broom between your legs. Stand on one leg and prop the other leg up. Bob up and down and make it look like you're flying and amaze your friends.
Do you know what kind of monkey can fly?
I know I'm going to regret this, but what kind of monkey can fly?
A hot air baboon!
One of the other flights of fancy used in The Wizard of Oz was the wizard's hot air balloon.
Unlike other forms of flight, ballooning is primarily used for entertainment.
Most people, it was their lifelong dream to go up in a balloon. So my thrill was watching their faces and gestures and everything as they were looking out over the countryside. Half the people I took up were totally scared, but 5 minutes into the flight, they just totally lost their fear because of the different things they were seeing.
In other parts of the country, even for a hot air balloon master pilot, the weather can sometimes be hard to predict.
Sometimes you just can't control the winds at all. So you just got to pick the best landing spot you can pick and hopefully land there. I had an interesting story once. The winds totally stopped and I literally had to land on this house. And from the burner noise, a little lady came walking out of the house and she looked up and saw the big balloon with 7 people in the basket and it just blew her mind. I said, "Can you give me a help?" And so she said, "Oh, help, well, what could I do?" So I threw her a rope. I said, "When I lift the balloon up off the house, can you just pull as hard as you can?" So she pulled and literally pulled me off the roof of the building. And she was just so shocked and excited. She said that was the most interesting experience she's ever experienced in her 80 years.
There are some areas that are ideal for ballooning, where unique weather patterns make for the perfect ride.
Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z here to tell you about one of my favorite weather phenomenon. I like a lot of them, but this one's pretty cool and beautiful. It's called the Albuquerque Box, and it allows for the balloon fiesta to happen in Albuquerque, New Mexico every year. So you see that these balloons are actually traveling all within one space. If you know anything about hot air balloons, they can go up and down by the pilot, but they cannot steer. So they need natural air currents, and Albuquerque happens to be the perfect place thanks to its geography. It's in a valley, and so the cold air at night sinks down and it creates kind of a northerly wind, right? But that northerly wind is at the surface, When the pilot takes that current and then rides it over to a certain place, they can go up and get to about 500 feet up where the southerly winds are coming up a little higher. And so then they will ride that air current. And they end up going in that box-like shape. It's almost like a Ferris wheel of nature that the hot air balloon can ride. It is a really brilliant and magical sight to see. It's also perfect in Albuquerque. Hope you learned a little something, and maybe you can join the balloon fiesta someday.
The ruby slippers are one of the most iconic parts of the movie.
They are beautiful.
A pair of them reside in the collection at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Preserving them for generations to come requires a lot of science.
Hi, I'm Dawn Wallace. I'm an objects conservator here at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and I had the privilege of working on the Ruby Slipper project. The most memorable part of working on this project was being able to look at every sequin and every bead under the microscope. It seems a little tedious, but I find that when you see something under a microscope, you can really start seeing the evidence of its use. Every sequin is different, every bead is different. You can also see the stitching. Everything was hand stitched on the bows, on the shoes, and the sequins. So you can see that really human touch. Now the shoes are 80 years old actually this year, and they have a lot of wear from being danced and worn during the filming. The Smithsonian's pair of shoes are very special in that we have orange felt on the bottom. And this felt would have been used in dancing and walking scenes so that you wouldn't have the echo on the yellow brick road in the plywood sets. So a lot of our conservation work was addressing the structural stability of the shoes themselves and the various sequins and beads that adorn them. So the sequins are aligned in biased rows that go around the shoe, and it makes this really nice, sleek appearance. So what we did is sequin by sequin, we would look at them, clean off surface dirt using a small plastic pipette attached to a vacuum cleaner and a soft brush. Now once the sequin was cleaned, we would look at the thread. Was it strong enough? Was it in threat of breaking? And if needed to, we would stabilize and strengthen the thread. The other thing we would do is that the sequins, if they had been flipped or misaligned, we would then use tweezers covered in Teflon tape to put them back into that proper alignment. We did not add any sequins, we did not repaint any segments or add any beads back. The shoes are 80 years old, and we really want to retain that history of their use.
Will you miss them?
I am very much going to miss having the shoes in the lab. I enjoy looking at them under the microscope, being able to pull them out of their box. It's going to be really hard to let them go, but I'm also really excited to share them with everyone else, to put them back on display so that the public can enjoy them as I have during this project.
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my! Lions and tigers and bears, oh my!
The Wizard of Oz continues to be an amazing story with effects that still look great even today.
And there are so many places where real-world science intersects the fantasy world created by L.Frank Baum over 100 years ago. Let us know what your favorite part of the movie was down in the comments. Was it part of the fantasy? Or was it some of the science that we learned today? And if you like this video, be sure to follow STEM30 on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.